Too lazy to think of something funny for this episode. Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to the Unstoppable Force podcast. I'm Guy,
And I'm Rob.
and today we are going to be talking about the state of the gaming industry.
Yeah, where we're at, and probably some really controversial things. And
Probably. Definitely.
yeah,
I think a lot of people are going to have some of their favorite games scrutinized here. And hopefully not their favorite developers. I feel like it's hard not to criticize these people anymore.
yeah. I mean, the problem is like, can you distinguish the developers from the people that are directing them to do or operate
Mm-hmm.
like in a certain way?
Well, I guess it kind of is almost like it's like an allusion to like Nazi Germany almost here,
Okay.
where it's like a question of like, are the soldiers at equally as fault as
Hmm.
the commander? And I would
Right.
say that sort of yeah.
I mean, I think that they would leave if they didn't like that. Like to do that, and like
Hmm.
if
But
they
you kind
leave,
of
is
get
somebody gonna just come and fill that void anyway, and it's gonna do the same thing?
But I think it's like a community. It's like if everyone else around you is thinking a certain way, you feel pressure to think that way, even if you don't entirely embrace it. And then slowly over time, you embrace it more and more and more because you don't want to dislike yourself. But you also want to like this thing. So the only way to do that is to just get the fuck over it. And I think that's probably part of like how people get fucked up in the brain, how
Possibly.
brainwashing and shit.
I don't know. I think it's more like, oh, we own like this shit. We have the money. We're gonna do it. It's like when Warner Brothers goes and meddles with like their movies and screws up
Hmm.
the whole DC universe. Like they did that because they think they're entitled to go in and do that because they have all
Hmm.
the money and they say we're gonna direct this way to do it. So if like the developers are doing something, either they're gonna get fired or they're gonna do it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like your job is on the line, but I do think that there's a way things work right now in the industry, and it's like if you've worked at one AAA, you know what it's like generally the process is going to be and how little control the people at the bottom definitely have.
True.
But yeah, so like just to start us off, I feel like we want to start out with how everything got to this point.
Yeah. Okay.
I think like where we're at now is like this change over these last few years, like primarily almost come from like mobile gaming.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that in like recent releases of games, and especially when the big games are going mobile. Like you have
Yeah.
Fortnite going mobile and PUBG that's like so big on mobile, it's insane. And then
Hmm.
any sort of league style game is on mobile.
I think it's kind of like once everyone basically has this device in their pocket that is essentially like a gaming device, and the fact that it was more sporadic. People wouldn't sit down and play on their phones for 3 hours, 4 hours straight, and instead was like 15 minutes, 20-minute intervals.
Yeah.
Like the way that they like kept you in the game and kept you like coming back for that every 15 20 minutes, like the psychological strategies, and then the fact that it was free, well, they have to
Mhm.
monetize it.
Right.
And so like mobile had all these years of figuring out the best way to manipulate people's pockets, and then AAA caught on because they were making more money on mobile than every other platform, like by a lot.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, we could make more money if we just put a fuck ton of microtransactions into our games and loot boxes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think that there's something that mobile has that just the gaming industry didn't have, which is a bigger, broader audience. So
Hmm.
you can have moms and little
Oh yeah.
sisters just having like, or like anybody can just get onto this game, and it's like a puzzle game or something stupid, addicting, clicking type
Hmm.
stuff. So you don't really need like the hardcore gamer to get into it, like
Yeah.
you will in like first person shooters. People that just don't play first person shooters, people don't play strategy games. Like it didn't matter. You on mobile, you had such a broad audience because the amount of people that have mobile like smartphones,
Hmm.
you're almost guaranteed to have a larger audience within that pool than with gamers and like releasing a game into that sphere.
For sure. I think making a like AAA scale microtransaction filled game is like a harder sell
Yeah.
than these like little free to play mobile games And that's like I think where everything really started, and that's like why, for example, Battlefront 2 blew up so hard was because they were like, "Whoa, what if we make a $60 game and we like make it completely void of content, and then we make
Uh,
it take 8,000 hours to actually get all the content in the game if you just played, or you've got to spend like $400." Like, that makes so much sense. We're going to pay $60 on top of having a free to fucking play game
right. Yeah.
with loot boxes, where the progression is tied to spending money, so it's also play to win.
Right. Yeah. It didn't even do the like same thing that you would have issue with Call of Duty, where you'll if you don't have the game in the first couple months, you'll be behind because everybody leveled up and they have like the AK-47. You don't
Mhm.
have it, you're screwed. You have some stupid ass pistol or whatever. But when it's just free to, I mean, like pay to win type of deal, then it doesn't even matter, and people are just in it in the first day buying stuff like that. And even if you play a long time, you're not going to get to that same level somebody can do like instantly.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like obviously Battlefront 2 is I feel like the most extreme version of like mobile game meets AAA without fixing either problem on either end. It was just like literally we'll make a $60. Like, I don't even want to go into it honestly. Um, but it's not even just like that. I think that was so egregious that we were like repulsed by it, but there's like a lot of smaller instances that are just as bad, if not worse, because they're trying to feel like they're hiding more under the radar.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the biggest things too is that demands from gamers has gone up, but these companies, they don't really want to spend that much, and development costs have increased. So they're taking like this low risk, like, and this also is related to the surge of games like on Steam that are early access, and people realized, oh wow,
Yeah.
people are willing to spend 30, $40 on a game that has nothing in it, knowing eventually there's going to be stuff in it.
Right.
And games as a service are blowing up, and games cost more money than ever to make, and we have to hire so many artists. Why don't we just like make these games that are essentially like made in a year or 2 years? They're filled with literally incredibly low amounts of content, and then we'll just spend the next 4 years filling them with content.
Yeah.
We've got like our No Man's Skies. Fallout 76 like just released, and that was made by a fucking company in Austin, Texas. That's not even the main Maryland
Yeah.
Bethesda
Oh, right.
company.
Right.
And they apparently threw that together in like a year or two.
Wow.
Anthem, even though it had 7 years of total development, uh, actually only was really thrown together in the last year and a half because
Right.
they had no direction. I guess that's more of like a management problem, though. It sounded like it was messy there. Um,
Well, they kind of shifted focus. Like the um like a I guess upper management probably like try to shift the focus on that game on
well,
the
I think
game.
like initially they were just playing around with a bunch of ideas, and they didn't feel like any time that they tried out what they were doing, it like felt like what they were looking for, I guess.
Right.
And then
Like
Patrick Soderlund, who is the chief creative officer at EA, he apparently was like, "Why don't you guys just make like an Iron Man fantasy like kind of game? Like,
yeah.
let's just make them fly. Let's just kind of create a game around that Iron Man fantasy with like really beautiful graphics, with 100% focus on graphics and the flying and the fire Iron Man fantasy."
Mhm.
And then they like redesigned the map so that they were all vertical and stuff, so that it was more fun to fly. Um, and they built the game like around that one idea, but like the first mission ever written was like within 2 weeks before their EA conference, where we saw the very first like video that was thrown together just for EA, and that was like essentially everything
Yeah.
at that point. I mean, like, all these games are kind of going for this like games as a service idea, where they're like, it doesn't matter if our game sucks at release. We'll make it
Right.
$60. We'll market the hell out of it like we always have. We'll make that money initially, and then we'll just keep producing content until the game's good.
I guess. Well, there might be this. I don't know if you would call it advantage, but I can see a situation where a game comes out like, let's just say like Apex, right?
Hmm.
Just for the sake, and it comes out and Now they want to do some sort of like updates or expansion, any sort of like additional content. Like they could just like get rid of a bunch of developers and roll in a whole bunch of new crew and just do it that way if they wanted to. If they can find for cheaper, they can just like do a whole bunch of firing and hiring a whole bunch because now they kind of got something concrete that they can build off of and just go with that.
What do you like? You mean like almost like that they had such good initial success that they're gonna like lower their development costs to
Right.
try to ride a wave, essentially?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like I think the AAA companies are just trying to get away with this. Like, I think with businesses, it's all about risk.
Yeah.
It's like as low of a risk as you can possibly get with the highest reward you can get, and they're striving so hard for that that they're like, well, we could make a game for less money,
Mhm.
charge $60 for it, release it unfinished, and finish it in a couple years.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, people seem to be like receiving that better than they maybe would have in the prior, world, the
Right.
version of the gaming
Well,
industry.
we kind of had that with pre-orders.
Right.
It's
And
weird.
pre-order
Like
should be dead. There's
right,
no
we
physical copy
okay.
of pre-order
So
anymore,
what we
people.
did was we like moved to pre-order. So now they realized, oh, people don't like pre-orders anymore. Let's give them a little bit of a game to basically be the pre-order, so that they have something in their hands, so that later
Uh-huh.
we can actually come out with the full game. It's essentially like pre-order content. Like you're getting it when you're pre-ordering. That's kind of
Right.
where it kind of moved
Except that
to.
the pre-order still costs you $60.
Well, well, that's true. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying they just try to make it so that you get something, however little it is.
Right.
They just turn the pre-order in. Like, think about it this way: they like open pre-orders like a few months, whatever,
Mhm.
beforehand. Well, now they could just release the game a few months beforehand and not be finished, and that's your pre-order right there. And then
Right.
later they can come out with the game. They
Yeah,
just did
essentially like
that.
early access,
Yeah,
where it's like they're doing an early access game, but then they're not even like telling you that it's early access, and that's kind of the duplicitous part.
yeah,
I mean, but this is like there's so many games in these last like 2 years. I mean,
yeah,
you've got Call of Duty Black Ops 4,
yeah.
which didn't even release its monetization until like a few months after release.
Because it knew it would get so much shit and
Oh
nobody
yeah.
would buy it. They were like, all right, let's just wait. We had this thing. We thought it was gonna be good. We found like nobody actually likes that, so
Hmm.
let's not put it in. Get the sales we wanted, and then release it.
And honestly, I think Activision might be one of the worst. I think they're actually worse than EA, and that may not be as popular of an opinion as other people. Not that people think Activision's good. It's just that people really hate EA.
Like, well,
Um,
they had it worse with Battlefront 2. That was the main reason.
yeah,
Like that got so much shit that was it.
they
That took the
basically like
yeah,
concreted themselves there.
yeah.
But I think that honestly, Activision is like destroying Blizzard after they acquired them.
Okay.
But we'll get into that in a second. But they for Black Ops 4, they also did this thing where if you wanted to get their maps for their multiplayer maps or their
Like,
zombies maps,
yeah.
you actually had to buy all three packages in a
DLC
not it's what's the word for it,
like a
a
loot box.
pass, a season
Oh,
pass.
okay.
So you couldn't just buy like one,
Yeah.
and you couldn't like buy them as they came out. You had to buy them in like a package in a season pass. I maybe that was like before they actually released them. I
That's
don't
just a
know if
bad
they
business
finally did
model.
that. It really is a bad business model.
Wow.
But it like the fact that they're even still doing that is like mind blowing to me because it splits the community. There's only a very small percentage of people that are going to buy those new maps.
Yeah.
So the people who buy them when they search for games are going to be there for like 10 minutes. In fact, I actually remember reading a post on Reddit for Call of Duty World War II, the not World at War, but the newer
Right.
one.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that was horrible in their loot box system. Oh my god,
Really?
you would just get duplicates constantly
Huh.
in that one. It was so bad. And the stuff that you would get was useless. And there would be like multiple of the same exact emote with different names, and you could get them.
What?
Yeah, it was insane.
That's so dumb.
And in that game, there was a ton, like people who had bought the maps, and they had reached out on it was either Reddit or Twitter to Activision about it, and they were like, "I can't find anybody to play this new map with." And they were like, sorry, due to there not being enough players,
Oh
like
my,
we can't find a match for you. And it's like, well, why did I buy these maps if
oh my
no
god,
one's playing them?
dude, that's what?
So like you can't, like, the way the world works now in the gaming industry, you really can't put maps, for example, behind a paywall
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
people who buy it will have no one to play it with because no one has it.
yeah.
And if their friends don't have it, then they can't queue together anymore.
Mhm.
Um, I guess
It's-
like they could get away with it back in like Modern Warfare 2 when everyone bought it, but now no one wants it.
I think we're getting more used to more content being released over time, and
Mm-hmm.
maps being something that changes up the game a little bit. Especially when games have like one map to start off with, like Apex or even like Fortnite. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're getting used to like those releases, and even like Siege, they have maps released like
But
you
those are
know.
free.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So this has been changing with releasing maps, so that's why it doesn't work now to do that.
A couple other games that were, I think, like pretty big, interesting, like changes in how the industry works is there's also kind of like a more woke mentality to it. And I think Battlefield 5 was a great example of this, where like
Yeah.
they had the main character be female, which
Right.
I have no problem with the main
Right.
character being female,
Hmm.
but it was
And
like,
disabled.
yeah, she was disabled. That,
Well.
I mean, I don't mind her being disabled. It's more that she has like a fucking cyborg arm that like
Okay.
it's like, how does it even work? It's World
Yeah.
War friggin' 2. This isn't like a steampunk game.
Yeah.
And then also, like when they made arguments against like women actually being in World War 2, it's like, yeah, there was, but they were mostly Russian,
Mm.
and it had to do with there
Like
being like not enough men,
right.
but there wasn't a
In
like in
combat.
this kind of
Yeah.
sense
Yeah.
like a woman, like you guys just
Hmm.
create a character
Right.
and you made her very unbelievable. And then the second we criticize that,
Right. I think that was more of the problem is that they like doubled down on it so hard that they kind of uh, like ostracized a lot of the gamers. They were just like, we don't give a shit about you guys. Like the fans that were like that really
mhm.
liked all the Battlefield series.
Yeah, that was Patrick Soderlund too.
Yeah.
He was, if you don't like it, don't buy it. That was like
Yeah,
him.
that was such a bad thing to say. Like it's true, but like you're just screwing up. You're screwing up so badly. Like especially in their, I think they had like their release party, and they had like a hashtag everyone's Battlefield, and surrounding it they had a bunch of different like tags on it, and it was like hashtag Genderfield 5 or like, you know, why did my grandfather storm the beaches of Normandy for this shit? Like
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like they were just
they just
shitting on their own
mocked.
fans, like that were criticizing the game. And
It's
it's
like
that. Why do you think your shit's gonna tank, bro?
a lot of people had no problem that it was female. They had a
Right,
problem with it being female and not also being historically accurate
right,
version of a female
right,
in this world.
right.
It was just like a man, but then they give her a female skin and
Mm,
said like, oh, this is exactly how like they would have acted. We're gonna create a fictional female character with a bionic arm in World War II and have her like basically like be hardcore in combat, and she's European,
yeah.
which there's very few other than like I said Russians, because there was a
Right.
ton of female Russians,
I
but
think
we don't have a lot of evidence of other females. And if they could just use like a real female, how cool would have that been if they actually used like a real historic
right.
female from World War II and had a
What's
story around them?
right? Like the when they had the black guy, and it's like, he was like part of whatever the black like air fighters,
Mm-hmm.
forgot what they're called, but like that's a real thing that happened.
No,
It
I'm
just
trying to
happened to
remember
be
that.
like the red tails, I think, something like
No.
that. Like that makes sense. But honestly, I think it was less about actually it being a woman and more of it being a woman and having criticism against that and just not giving a shit about that at
Yeah.
all and just calling everybody like sexist and shit like
Mhm.
that. And like, well, no, like get the hell out of here. Your sales are just gonna tank.
On top of honestly all of that controversy, the game released with not all of this story, the single player story missions out. The
You even know that.
multiplayer was done, but I think a lot of people thought it needed some significant balancing updates, and they didn't release their Battle Royale, and they decided to release that like 3 months later.
Even later than
Even
that.
later than that,
Isn't it
yeah.
even out?
Oh yeah, it's been out.
Okay.
I'm about to get into
Okay.
that. They basically released only like a third of a game essentially, or like 50% of the game that they promised the people who actually bought it before it came out.
Okay.
Um, and then when the battle royale actually did
Mm.
finally come out, it was underdeveloped. It didn't have much in it, and there was quite a bit of few like people that really enjoyed the way it played because it was kind of PUBG-ish, but
It's
with that
mm,
Battlefield engine that made it feel very
right.
like boots on the ground action. Like that was really
Well,
fun.
I don't know if this tells you anything about it, but I didn't know that it came out.
Oh yeah, I mean,
And like I haven't seen any gameplay in any sort of sense, or I don't know anything about it. Like this, that's crazy. I was like always like, oh, this is gonna be cool. Like fit like finding out how they're gonna do it differently, and I just didn't even realize that it came out.
they
On
didn't do a bad job with it, but they definitely didn't support it.
Well, I said this about I've said this about Call of Duty, and same thing with Battlefield. If they come out with the Battle Royale as a separate like game, like if you can just buy that like for like $20 or less or whatever it is, instead of having to buy the full game, I think they would have a lot more sales in those parts of the
For
game, and
sure.
I would probably have owned at least one of the two.
I think like me, like I was talking about this with a friend too when that came out. I was like, if this was like $10 or something, or like $15, I'd spend $10 and play the Battlefield 5 Battle Royale.
Oh
But
yeah,
to try to convince somebody to spend $60 when
yeah,
they do not want to play the story mode and they don't want to play the camp or the multiplayer and they only
yeah,
want to try the Battle Royale, chances of you actually getting somebody to buy it for that price is like basically nothing. You're just
yeah,
not gonna get anyone.
yeah,
Um, and then there's like sticking within the woke world. Was also Mortal Kombat X that just released,
yeah.
and they made this decision to cover up all their females.
Right, and and deliberately, and like because they said it's more mature and it makes more sense for females to be covered in like combat or when fighting and such.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, at the
Yep.
very same time, having like Baraka in a loincloth essentially being ripped like to like totally like buff as all hell, and like almost all if not all of the male characters like being shirtless. It's just
Basically,
like
yeah.
there's no the standard just is it's not upheld, and it's we kind of saw that with the previous Mortal Kombat where they kind of made it a little tamer than nine. Nine was crazy. If you go back to nine, there was like cloth, like barely just cloth, like wrapped around a
Yeah.
couple of the female characters. Which like I understand, like covering up, like whatever, like
That might
make
be
it
an
a little
extreme.
bit better. Like Mortal Kombat 10 did a pretty good job of doing that, but now they're just covered head to toe, and it don't even make any sense. Like
I mean, I've always
yeah,
liked this like idea of a wide range of characters with different personalities, and it's like in real life, there's going to be women that dress more provocatively, and there's
yeah,
also going to be women who don't.
right,
And there's
yeah.
going to be men who do,
Mm,
who dress more sexually, where
mm,
they're trying to get their shirt off every chance they can so they can show off their abs
yeah,
and how they work out or whatever. And there's also going to be the guys who aren't going to do that. And I think that by doing this awkward like situation where all the females were covered from head to toe and desexualized with strong intent as well, and it comes off that way.
yeah,
But then the men were basically unaffected by the changes and were like just as ridiculous as they were in
uh-huh.
like Mortal Kombat 9.
Right,
It makes just it's like it's actually almost sexist when they were trying not to be sexist because it's
right.
the equivalent of saying women aren't allowed to show off their bodies.
Right. On top of like they can't be badass and be like strong and being sexy at the same time.
Yeah, why can't somebody be strong and sexy? And it's like like you could even made it so that some characters who were more prudish or
Yeah.
more like kind of um personality wise likely to
Right.
wear more clothes
Right.
and then go with the characters who may not have and have them wear less clothes.
Yeah, they have that. Like they have the females that are like Katana, Melina that are like probably more sexualized. But then you have like Cassie Cage, where
Hmm.
like the more militarized like females, like just that makes sense. They're in their uniform or whatever it is. It just makes sense for the character. Don't do it just for the sake of doing it. And I
And
think also weren't the models for all the females the same? They just copied and pasted all of them or
the
something like
models
that.
were very similar to
Okay.
each other, and unfortunately, in the gaming industry, women tend to be incredibly under detailed.
Yeah.
Like it. I think it's generally more difficult to actually like model a female body
Hmm.
than a male body. According to my significant other, who is a 3D modeler.
Okay.
Um, and uh, it on top of that, there's more of a single specific body type that men prefer, and since the audiences are prefer like a majority men, and also like the face types can be very similar as well with females. There's very little differentiation in females in the gaming world, and I actually think that's both male and female's faults.
Hmm.
Is like I think that when women play characters, they want to play the cute or sexy or like
Hmm.
no one really enjoys playing fat and ugly characters.
Yeah,
Um,
or even if you had like a average looking character, or you
mhm.
picked one that's above average, or like sexier or slimmer, or like more buff, you're gonna usually go towards that. It doesn't have to be like just extreme of ugly. It's just like even if you had the average height, build, like looking, you're gonna pick the one that looks more extraordinary.
Yeah. Um, I think that the main difference is that with men, there's like a larger range of body types that are socially acceptable and like don't affect a male's almost appreciation of that character. I think there's more of a personality focus for the males, and then with the females, there definitely is a more aesthetic and attractiveness focus, and that is what like creates this the developers decision to make females generally more singular in their body types and their face types and so on and so forth. So I don't really blame them entirely for that, but it definitely seemed a little lazy, and it kind of feeds
Right.
into that idea that the women aren't different and they're all just kind of
Right.
everybody's covered from head to toe. None of their personalities were taken into account.
Yeah.
These aren't characters. They were just like caricatures. They were like not really themselves. They
Mhm.
were just
Well, yeah,
like visually.
and it's like really disappointing to see like just they have insane like they ramped up the gore even more and like really good like blood physics when they have fatalities,
Hmm.
and like we had this extreme like we just went more extreme with that, but then like let's just tone down on like this like the sexual rating basically, like no like give the whole point of Mortal Kombat was the whole fantasy of like just
Sexy, badass,
yeah,
death,
just yeah,
blood, gore,
turn that shit
sex.
to 11. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like that was the whole point of
It was
it.
supposed to be like racy. It was supposed to be
Yeah,
controversial,
yeah,
and they like made it controversial in like the 2019 way instead
oh
of like
yeah,
just the fun way.
yeah,
You know.
totally, totally.
um, I mean, like even beyond just like the wokeness, the fact that like so many of these games are so underdeveloped, and like there was also like Sea of Thieves, wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle.
Yeah, yeah.
There was like the whole what's it called the game that No Man's
No Man's
Sky.
Sky.
um there's even like GTA 5, which was heavily monetized.
Hmm.
Red Dead Redemption came out, and they seem to kind of have like been super lazy with their online this time around. I guess because they can't make as much money.
Yeah. I mean, like they have like not as much content
Mhm.
as like available to them as they would like a modern a game set in like modern times. Like
Yeah,
you can make all these different cars and all these stuff, different things,
yeah,
but
like
you
Apache
can't.
helicopters and
Yeah,
tanks
you
and
can't make a
APCs
different
and
kind of horse. It's a
yeah.
horse. You can change like the color of the horse, but
Hmm.
you can't really like soup it up. Like they have that like oh you can put like the saddle or whatever and you can change that stuff up, but no you can't really like supercharge it or have the different models or like I don't know if they
Like having
could.
the full customization with like
Right,
6 different bumpers and
right,
like 5
right.
different
Mhm.
spoilers
And you
and
can't get all like the crazy races that you can get in GTA,
yeah.
like going upside down up walls. Like that's like oh you can like for like
It was definitely
Like,
more designed as a game as a
right.
service and for
Yeah.
monetization
Yeah.
than Red Dead
Yeah.
Redemption was, and
And look,
there's definitely potential there, and it doesn't seem like they're creatively trying that hard. It feels more like they recognize that there's not an opportunity to make as much money, and instead of spending time and effort finding ways to make it still fun,
mm,
even though they can't monetize it as well, I bet you the like 2K is like, yeah, you guys we're not giving you a
right.
big budget this year or this time around for the online mode. We're just going to make you immediately start working on GTA because we want to get it out as soon as
Yeah.
possible so that we can start making the billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars we made off of that online mode.
Right. Well, I think it could also be like, I know like GTA has always been really good to single player, right, and like
Mm-hmm.
open world, and like Red Dead Redemption 2 was so damn good and so beautiful and so like developed that
Mm-hmm.
I think they might have just went into that, and like, because when GTA 5 came out and then like a month later they had the online come out and they kind of had a lot in there just to begin with. I think they didn't put that much in to begin with before going into releasing the online for Red Dead Redemption
I mean,
2.
the thing with all these like games as a service is that they all have the opportunity to technically get to the point where like No
True.
Man's Sky has, where
Right.
it's actually a good game.
Yeah.
Um, so you never know. We could be criticizing them now, and then 2 years from now, Anthem is like one of the most played games out there, or
Maybe.
like Fallout 76 is like 5 years down the line, it's like one of the biggest MMO light survival games out there. Like these games, I think there is a mentality of these companies to keep
I
just
mean,
adding and adding and adding until the audiences come back, but
I mean
it
that's
also creates like a ridiculous amount of competition between all of them for everyone's time, and it's kind of crazy. I think it's just like it's a big, it's like a crash that's like ready to happen. Triple A
like a
crash.
bubble
It's
ready
like
to
a
burst.
bubble, yeah.
Okay.
Where I think like eventually everyone's gonna lose complete and total trust in these Triple A companies to the
Yeah.
point where they're like, yeah, we're just not like even touching games until a few days after
Mm.
release, where after we've watched Twitch,
Twitch. Oh yeah.
and we've watched YouTube videos.
Yeah, and the people that they paid them to go
Mhm.
play the games to go do. It's like, oh, we'll watch the guys that like these companies gave the game out to
Mhm.
go play to show it off. We'll let you know.
And if there's too many games as a game, like too many games become games as a service, it means that they're all instead of so normally like prior to the games as a service like rampage that's been happening, when a games would make their money, they would make it almost all at once
Mm.
in the first few months after release, and it didn't matter if the game did terribly ratings wise, right? I mean, it did matter because it means that less people buy their following game, but so long as they could market the game really well and get a
Yeah.
ton of people to pre-order it and buy it, the ratings didn't reflect the earnings often. But nowadays, if you have a game as a service, traditionally games as a service either are free or they're at reduced costs.
Mm.
Or if they are $60 games, there's like a ton of content and then something else that they're working on, like GTA,
Yeah. Yeah.
where they're releasing like a $60 worth of content in the form of single player, and then they're doing this multiplayer on the
Right. Right.
side.
Yeah,
Um,
and what we have now is we only need like one day to know if a game is good or that we like a game,
yeah,
and like each individual goes, because you can just sit and watch Twitch streams, and you can just know what the game, if it's good or not. It's not
yeah.
like you have to wait for like your next issue of Game Informer to tell you how the game was, or whatever, like IGN
Mhm.
to come out with something.
It's like 2
It's
days after.
Yeah.
Metacritic's already got like
Yeah.
50 to 100
Yeah.
critical reviews
Yeah.
on there.
It's like make or break within the first like 24 hours,
Yeah.
especially if it, because now there's way more digital like copies, like there's way more bought digitally than it is physically, like almost
Mhm.
guaranteed. So that's how like these games they
Pre-orders
can
need to
break on the
end
first
too.
day.
Pre-orders
Yeah.
need to die, and they're
Yeah.
dying slowly. But
Well,
every
I
time
hope we
somebody
learned
gets
our
hyped out for a next game, and
the,
they just for some reason don't care, that
the
they're hurting the industry every time they buy a pre-order.
yeah, and they'll get a nylon bag instead of a canvas bag.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
what they get.
Yeah.
Um, God, Fallout 76. Honestly, out of every single one of these, Fallout 76 may be probably the most like disgusting in terms of the practices that were done in terms of the atomic store and treatment of consumers. I don't even want to get into it.
Yeah,
Like, you guys can do your own research. There's a lot of stuff you probably don't know about Fallout 76 that they have done
maybe we have to do.
with like refunds, the canvas bag situation, plagiarism,
Just
like
updates that just go wrong that they have to go back on.
stealth nerfing,
Yeah.
adding grinds to the games over like 10, like literally over 1,000 bugs, that exploits that were ruining the entirety of the economy of the game, where weapons and items were being sold on black markets on Reddit and online for like 20, 30, 40, $50. They couldn't stop the exploits. Like, holy crap, guys, this game was a fucking piece of garbage. Like, hot garbage.
Yeah.
But
So,
like, beyond even all of that stuff, another huge issue in these AAA companies is that they're actually abusing their developers
mm,
in terms of the hours that they're working. We've got like story after story after story, epic. We had the situation at Anthem with BioWare having to throw the
mm.
whole game together in the last year because of mismanagement. We have, oh my god, like there's just so many games that like Epic came out that the Fortnite was overworking its development team. There was a CD Project Red apparently was doing like hundreds of hours of work, but people overlooked that one because Witcher 3 was so great. You know, when the game is good, consumers are like, "Oh, they worked that many hours. Well, it was a great game, so it was worth it."
Mm.
You know,
Right,
like they got their
definitely.
bonuses, I guess. You know,
Fingers crossed.
by the way, most of these developers actually get bonuses based off of ratings a lot of the time, and I think like if they do sell a certain amount of copies, I think they can also give them bonuses. But like one of the biggest ones
Ratings
is Metacritic ratings, actually.
do that.
Yeah, so all the people like BioWare didn't get any of their bonuses for like any of these games because they all did terrible.
So dumb. Ratings are like random half the time.
Mhm. But like these situations are like so bad that people are apparently like going into other rooms and like crying at work, taking month-long mental health breaks, working like 80 to 100 hour a week. Um, and I'm only like mentioning people off the top of my head. There's probably quite a bit more. Oh, right, Mortal Kombat X, the development team
Mm,
behind them, there was a recent article on that as well.
I know that.
Um, so many of these companies though, and it just like it keeps happening, and there's more and more information about how these like publishers treat their developers, and they're like livestock almost
Mm.
more than they are people. Um, and that I mean, like, there's the people talking about unionizing workers in the gaming industry.
They
Uh,
do. I don't really hear that a lot.
I mean,
That's the
like some
thing.
people are saying like that could happen. Like
I
I'm
mean,
just saying
yeah,
like we
yeah.
may
Like
see
doesn't.
like strikes
Yeah.
start happening in
Right.
AAA companies.
Yeah.
And another really cool thing is actually like a lot of these people are leaving
Mm.
and going to their like own starting their own indie
Yeah,
companies.
yeah.
So the
That's really good.
creative strength of AAA companies is waning because all the really good developers are
Hmm.
leaving.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's always a fear though of like filling the void, especially when like it's so competitive to just become a game developer,
Hmm.
and when like a lot of like even like being younger and being like, oh, I want to create a game, I want to be like do this, and then you're like, oh, I want to like be able to create the GTA that I was playing. So now like if the developers just need more, if the companies need more developers, they'll just go to those like the young blood and just
Hmm.
take them up and that's it. Like there's always gonna be the developers there, and whether or not they're good, that's a whole nother story. There's always the company's gonna be there, and it might just fail because of the content just gonna get worse.
Hmm. And there's actually, I mean, there's a whole another totally different controversy that I think is going to completely shake the gaming industry on top of just all of these AAA games basically shitting the bed
Yeah.
super hard, and that is exclusives and the like new like digital distribution competition in the form of Epic Store, and then you've got Discord who's coming up. They have a store themselves now. They have a subscription service that's like $10 a month to get games. There's GOG. There's uh, I know Amazon has their own one, but I don't know if you can
Oh,
buy that much stuff on it. I think there's very
I
few.
don't know. Well,
Then there's the Tencent store
mm,
that recently launched in
all right.
America. Um, So there's like a ton of new distributors,
So
digital distributors.
here's the real question: is has exclusive been controversial before? Because we've always had exclusives on like Xbox or PlayStation, and like that's always fueled the like, oh, this console is better than that one. So but like even recently we had Spider-Man, that's only on PlayStation. So why do we just look at those and be like, oh, that's just exclusive to a console? Meanwhile, now we have a game that's just released on a launcher that's exclusive. We get all bitchy about that.
So I think the best way to look at it is that when you look at it as consoles, it works a little differently than it does right now on PC for a few reasons. One, Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo will throw them in. And Nintendo's kind of been sitting on the sidelines and doing
Because
its
they
own
have their
thing.
own
Yeah.
like their whole they're
I mean, they've
based
always
around
been behind on
exclusive.
their software and their hardware, though, behind
Right,
Xbox and Sony,
right.
and they focus more on their exclusives
Because
as carrying them.
mm,
But like between Sony and Xbox, they they're so competitive with each other that their software was just as competitive as their exclusives, as competitive as their hardware. They had to match everything to each other, or else one of them would fall off.
right.
So we didn't see features of their interfaces be affected by exclusivity. On top of that, the exclusive games that they did have were developed in house. The money that was spent on them was spent by Microsoft themselves on companies that were
Mm-hmm.
owned by Microsoft for Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with Sony. And I think that because we didn't see any downside to the actual software and the interfaces and the UIs and the actual um, the part that the player had to deal with when using the Xbox or the PlayStation, uh, and these exclusives were made by these companies, so it felt like fair game. Both companies were making their own exclusives.
Right, right.
That's what made it okay. But on the PC world, we're seeing Epic outright say that they don't believe that making their platform competitive to Steam is worth it
Mm-hmm.
comparatively to just buying up exclusives. So that forces the consumer into this position where they have to go to an inferior product and be annoyed by that inferior product because they want to get a game
Mm-hmm.
that they otherwise can't get.
Right.
And it's not even like Epic's making these games because, like, I'm not complaining that Fortnite isn't on Steam.
That's
No
true.
one's complaining that Fortnite isn't on Steam. Fortnite was made by Epic. It should be on the Epic Store.
Mm.
But
It's
these other games are made by indie
right.
developers and some AAA
It's
developers.
why we like initially there was complaint about having to get the Bethesda launcher for Fallout 76. Then that was before like the whole like it being bad when it came out. I'm saying like before it came out, everybody was like, "Oh, you're gonna have to get the Bethesda launcher just to get Fallout 76." Well, it's like understandable because they made that game.
Yeah, no one complained about it.
Yeah,
They were like, fine. I mean, they want to make 100% of their revenue stream, right? They
yeah,
don't want to give 30% to Steam or 20% to Steam.
yeah.
They want that full revenue, and if they have the platform and they have the money to make their own service, sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but like these are like some small games. Like these are like small indie games and games that had promised before them being on the Epic Store that they promised
Mm.
people who backed them, whether it was like a Kickstarter
Yeah.
or some projects, they specifically said that this was going to be on Steam, and then they
Okay.
changed
Well,
it
that's a whole different.
halfway through.
I mean, I'd be mad at that, regardless of like of that, because like if you promised it was gonna be on Steam, that's one thing. But if you didn't promise that, that's like a whole nother thing. Like you can't get mad at it if they didn't say anything. But totally, if they're gonna say, oh, this is where we're gonna release it, we're gonna set you up just to get this, then yeah. But now you just screwed. You said, oh, you have to get this other launcher that like there's a not really a community in there for. We don't have any. There's no forums or any help around there. Yeah, that's totally fucked up.
And I mean, like, I think personally, Steam does need the competition, and it
Mm-hmm.
needs to lower its 30% share because we all know that Steam doesn't really deserve 30% share. It's a
No.
lot of share,
Yeah.
and I mean, it makes up like I think like 40% or 50% of the income of Valve, and Valve has one of the I think they're like in the top 5 companies or something like that. Don't quote me on this, but they're in like the top 5 companies with the lowest number of employees compared to revenue.
Wow.
So
Okay.
like the ratio of employees to revenue
Yeah.
is like really high at Valve.
Yeah.
So they I mean they basically created a turnkey
Yeah.
business where they just set up the infrastructure and then they go, okay, come to us, we'll take a bunch of your money,
Yeah.
and we'll do nothing
Well,
really.
they have the whole, because they have so many people on there too. They have sort of an way to convince developers to put the game on there. Like, look how many people are on here. Your game's gonna get seen. It's gonna
Oh
get
yeah.
bought on here. So yeah, they have to be competitive, but they also have a reason to that they have so many games on there, and
I
why
mean, you
that's why
can
people like
buy
them.
actually a Ubisoft game on Steam,
Exactly.
but it'll just launch the Uplay launcher. But
Yeah.
at least you have the Steam like library. It's there.
Hmm.
You have cloud saving. I'm sure. I think that
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe it doesn't actually work like
I
that.
mean, even if like Ubisoft has its own, like these other developers have their own, like Ubisoft has it. I think Gearbox with the shift code.
Epic doesn't have it.
Okay,
Epic has
well,
nothing. Epic
no,
has
hold
literally
on, no, no,
nothing.
no, 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 no. Like each developer has it. Yeah, Steam has it in addition to that,
Mhm.
but like Fortnite has that if you went between, I think if you had your account go between your the platforms. So
That's
like,
more like profile saving than like cloud saving.
true,
Like
true.
if I play, like let's say, um, Borderlands 3 comes
Hmm.
out, I play it on my laptop, and then I want to go and play it on my PC because I brought my laptop over to my
Hmm.
friend's house in
Yeah.
order to play with him. There is not a cloud save for that. They don't have cloud saving, so I would actually have to
Okay.
go into the files, copy the save, put it on a or flash drive,
Hmm.
and then put it onto my other game.
Okay.
I
I,
mean, at least
I,
I think that's how I would have to
right.
do
I
it,
think
but
that's a valid complaint to have if so many games, like the bigger games, didn't have their own sort of saves.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, and I'm going to give one thing to Steam that they've are phenomenal on, and that is that they have been consistently releasing features, consistently releasing updates, and like adding so many features to their platform despite not having competition. And I think that we need to praise them for that because they were somewhat consumer friendly. They actually were just less developer friendly.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the only
Yeah.
problem is
Yeah.
they were consumer friendly but not developer friendly.
Well, we started to get a bunch of like Origin has that's for
Hmm.
EA and Ubisoft has their own thing from there. Obviously Epic has theirs. Bethesda just came out with one, so
Blizzard has one.
yeah, absolutely. Blizzard has theirs. So like, there's an exodus of the big developers just saying, "Nah, we're just gonna take our stuff back because we're big enough to make our own launchers,"
Yeah.
and that kind of causes more competition. Like, yeah, there's not a full another whole host, in a sense, like a Steam competitor directly.
Well, GOG is actually I think one of the major Steam
Okay,
competitors. There's some people who use it, and I think Discord is like a dark horse.
they're trying. Yeah, they're definitely trying to get in there, and they're putting a lot of those more indie games
Mhm.
there to sort of like, oh,
I
here's this. It looks like kind of like here's all these free to play ones here, and then here if you have Nitro or whatever, then you can get those. And they're just gonna start building because they already know they have so many people using
They
Discord
have more
as
people
a
than even Steam.
right, exactly. So
They have the users of everything
mhm,
combined.
right, so they it makes so much sense for them to do that, and
Mhm.
they can invite so many companies, developers to just go there and just
Oh yeah.
host it there, and they can be as like um be the same sort of split as Steam possibly, with as far as revenue, like
I mean,
30, 70.
I think
I'm
a
just saying.
permanent 20% split for Steam would be better because
Yeah.
they do a 20% split if you sell over 1 million copies, I believe is the number. But that means only AAA's or
Yeah.
like really successful indie companies are going to be able to break that
Yeah.
sales number.
Yeah.
Um, so it's actually very anti-indie as well, which is why I
Mhm.
think we're seeing a lot of indie developers on Epic Store right now. But
Yeah.
then they just end up being forgotten and not noticed because they're not big enough to have the marketing of a AAA company to actually overcome the fact that they're not on the Steam store. Because a lot of people go to the Steam store and hit new and trending and see
Yeah.
and what is best selling this week and stuff like that to find out what new games are even out. I mean, like there was literally the game World War Z like flew under the radar.
Right. Yeah. And Epic
Um,
Games. Yeah.
there's a lot of games that were released on the Epic Game Store that just fly under the radar. Like even Metro, the new
Mm.
Metro Exodus, I didn't hear that much and I didn't see that much people playing it.
Yeah.
Um, but like even then, like Valve, they're not even like making games, and it seems like they're diving into this like VR world too, which is
Mm.
is interesting. I feel
Well,
like
they kind of yeah, they have like the Steam, the big picture. Then they have the whole like Steam VR. So they're trying to like integrating more games into that, and then with coming out with their own VR, right?
mhm.
So it kind of makes more sense for them because if they want to still be hosting games and they can host VR, why not be able to just have a bunch of VR games there that's from a whole bunch of different developers, have your software and then your hardware even have that to run that.
Yeah, and they just came out with the new headset and their new controllers,
Hmm.
and there was like another thing that you could get. I kind of forget what it is though. It was like I think it you hook it up to the headset, it makes it
Oh, like what?
possibly I think a
What?
higher like hardware
Okay.
specs.
Okay.
Um, and it seems like they're just going like full in on VR, and it'll be interesting to see the future of Steam in that sense, because I think that I don't know what they're gonna do with their platform. That they have most of the features you can really have on Steam, and we're
Yeah.
just like waiting for everyone else to catch up. They definitely need to lower their percentage split, and
Yeah.
start coming out with more like games, hopefully in VR.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but another company that isn't going to have a game this year is Blizzard. I mean, they're straight up. This is gonna be the first year apparently in like 10 years or like something like that they didn't have a game every year or something. Something big
That's
actually. Maybe it's less than that. Maybe it's like five
no.
years or
Really?
yeah. Because I think there's no WoW expansion.
Oh, right. Forgot about
There's
those.
there's no WoW expansion. There's no Diablo 4. There's no StarCraft, any expansions in
Mm.
StarCraft. So there's like no expansions and no games coming out
Mm.
this year for Blizzard, and it's like the first year
Oh
in
no, we just
forever.
got one new, character for Overwatch.
Yeah, one new character every 3 months, right?
Yeah.
For a year.
Yeah.
God.
Oh my god.
Like, and that game too is so mismanaged. Like, literally, how much money did that game make? And you could tell that from day one, the development speed never increased. The content released never
Mhm.
went up.
God no.
It's just been this slow like release, and I think it was kind of what I was saying earlier with Activision. I think it's Activision giving them a budget and
Mm.
saying we will not give you more money, even if you
Yeah.
make 100 times what we give you in a budget.
Yeah.
We're not gonna hire more people. We're
Yeah.
not gonna increase the budget for your studio.
Like even the events seem like so far between, like in game, like between like holidays and whatever they have.
And they nowadays they just like repaint their old like game modes and
Yeah.
change a couple
Dude,
things
I
and
don't
go new
think
game mode.
dude, they haven't even come out with new game mode in a long time.
Um, I think it's not all bad though.
Thank
I
God.
think one really awesome thing is that single player games have been fucking amazing. Like, it's funny too because it was the CEO, Andrew Wilson of EA, like last year or the year before. No, it was the year before that. It was Battlefield 2's year. Sorry,
Mhm.
Battlefront
Battlefront
2's
2.
year.
Battlefront.
Where he said that single player games were dying.
Yeah.
And then it was that year that at the video game awards, like 95% of every game that got an award that wasn't in a
Mhm.
specifically multiplayer only category
Right.
got all of the awards. Like literally all
Yeah.
single player games.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild came out that year. Mario Odyssey came
Mhm.
out that year. Super Mario. What is it? Is
I
it
think so.
Super
No, I think it's Mario Odyssey.
Super Mario Brothers Odyssey? Is it or Mario Brothers?
I
I
think it's
don't know.
Mario
Mario
Odyssey.
Odyssey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like
Mario
that.
Odyssey came out. I mean, there was that other game that like won a ton of awards. Was it like Hellblade? Um, I never actually played it. And then there was God of War that came out.
Oh
There
yeah.
was oh my god, that was also the same year that Horizon Zero Dawn came out. That was the like
Oh
literally
yeah.
single player games have been doing amazing right
Didn't
now.
like Tomb Raider also at some point they
Yeah, but
had
I don't think the
something.
Tomb Raider was well received though. It was kind of lukewarm.
I think
Definitely.
Tomb Raider. That's true.
But there's just been so many really good single player games.
Yeah, you have Spider-Man that just came out, and then
Yep.
Red Dead Redemption 2, which
Yeah.
like you consider a single player game.
Yeah.
That
Let's
like,
just forget that it's even a
yeah, like
multiplayer mode because they did.
yeah, I mean yeah, I mean I kind of would if it took like that long and like you put so much like development into that, like hell yeah. Um,
I mean, and there's a couple companies that are still making decent multiplayer games. You've got Ubisoft with Siege, and they had like the a la carte style
Yeah,
of store, and like there was stuff that you could buy both with actual real money and then also with in-game money. You could get all the characters. The maps come out for free,
yeah,
and you get this all nowadays for like $15.
yeah. For like the beginning, like oh, setup of operators at least.
And they have like a really good competitive mode too that I think really entices
Mm,
people to stay to the game, and
yeah,
it's a high skill
and
mode
they just
where
revamped it too. Like they set the like level cap on casual,
yeah.
and they switch how what you need to be level for competitive. So they really like know the community and really
hmm
know how to keep the players at the right spots.
And then Division 2 like came out right after Anthem and was like, "Hey guys, what was that? Why don't you come over here instead? We won't like completely
Yeah.
fucking
I
like
don't know. I kind
ruin
of
a game and manipulate you and lie to you and make you think that we're actually releasing more than we are and
yeah. Even though like
canceling our plans for our fucking this was actually really recently happened with that where they had their roadmap and now everything important on the roadmap is being delayed
wow.
indefinitely.
Well, like
It's supposed to
my
be out
issue with
already.
Division Two is like it didn't get a lot of like press, I guess, and we had Division One, and that kind of was just in a sense disappointing. So now it's just like, how do people like I've talked to people like, oh, when it came out, it's like, oh, we're playing, we're gonna go, whatever. I'm just like, you guys like actually care about that game? Like I thought it was just a nothing to me. It was just like, how did they like survive coming out with a new game?
Well, apparently it got really good. The first one got really good at the very end of like after like a ton of DLC and
Okay,
everything came out. Um, but the second one was like they learned from all their mistakes and they actually like
that
made a decent
like
game.
Watch Dogs too. I would like the same thing happen.
No, Watch Dogs 2 was awful.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
I
Yeah, I
think
didn't.
everyone hated both of those games, and they'll never make another.
That's true.
I think that IP failed horribly. Um, but then like we also got like Borderlands 3, which is like maybe a little more controversial, which is kind of a good egg in that they're trying to not make
Right.
battle royales
I
and
think
there's no
they
microtransactions.
right. They stayed the lane of the game and like what fans wanted. So oh, they're on a like exclusive for like 6 months. Like I don't really blame them entirely. But then again, if you look at if the split was so bad on Steam, now they're doing it on and they're going to Epic Games launcher. Like, wouldn't you want to support the developers way more? So now you can actually go buy it on this other on the this other store. So now they're actually getting more money than they would on Steam. In effect, supporting them more.
Well, the thing is like Randy Pitchford, for example, like it's like I understand maybe why if you're frustrated that gamers don't like that you're on the Epic Store,
Yeah.
but if you want them to actually, change their opinions and get the game, you should do it by recognizing that they're coming from potentially a place of ignorance,
Mm-hmm.
enlighten them in a respectful and non-patronizing and condescending way, and then now that they are enlightened, you have a much easier time convincing them. And you know what? You could even be like, hey, I made more money by going to the store, so we're gonna give a little back to the gamer.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
mean, it's kind of fascinating, but previously to digital sales, actually, and this makes me a little less sympathetic towards these developers. Previous to these digital sales, like developers would only make like 30% or 40% because they would lose so much money to distributors, to the people who have to make all these boxes, all the discs, GameStop, their publishers, like
Mm.
everything. They're losing so much to all these different places. So even though they're making, the same number of sales of a game, they're getting over twice as much money on each
Mm.
sale than they did only 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
So why don't like we've been waiting as gamers for these companies to give us a little back because they no longer need to charge us as much to get the same out because there's
Yeah.
not all these middlemen that they have to deal with. And we as the consumers have seen none of that return at all. We've not gotten anything. We haven't seen any reduction in prices. And all these developers and publishers continue to complain about the prices of developing these games, which I know it's expensive, but I don't think that the answer is that these games are just too expensive to make. I just think that they're not being managed very well, and that they're trying to lower the risk so much.
Right, right.
But there is some good eggs, and Nintendo's another good egg. They're really making some fantastic games. The Switch has
Yeah,
been a great console.
and they like making, I guess, their online better, especially like they start charging for it, but then I think that's just for maintenance on that because previous to that, their online was so bad. Like going back, obviously the Wii was kind of a long time ago, but then Wii U and just their online, they just didn't know what to do with it really. If you try to play any sort of game,
We'll see you next week.
and
And
until
until
then,
then,
stay
stay
unstoppable.
unstoppable.